Hey Clayton, Chris here. What is the best way of selling an investment property with regards to occupancy? I tried to sell one of my outer market properties through Roofstock at one point, unsuccessfully as it turned out. Since that's an investor to investor market, they prefer the properties to be fully occupied. Now I'm looking into relisting the same property, but this time I'm thinking of finding a local realtor. I'm guessing that using this method, they would prefer the property to be vacant. But is that how they would sell for an investor? Would they approach the current tenants and ask if they would like first dibs on owning the property themselves? Or if not, or if the tenant says no, then would I need to start the process of removing the tenant from the property? I would presume I'd have to wait until the lease term was up. If it was month by month, I could probably give them 30 or 60 days notice. Or would I list the property with a tenant in it and then give them notice once I get under contract? Of course, that would make me feel like a heel kicking them out for nothing, that they did deserve it. But how have you done it in the past when you were starting out investing?
Thanks, Christopher. Great questions. So let's unpack a few of these things. First of all, it all really depends on your goals, right? Is it your goal to sell it quickly, right? That certainly would weight my answer, right? If you need to sell it ASAP, then there's certain things you would want to do to sell it quickly. If you don't care about that, and you want to maximize profits, that would be something you discuss with a realtor based on the current market conditions and seeing, well, I could really get bang for my buck if this house was vacant and I could stage it properly and go through the whole 9 yards. If this is a residential market where you're definitely going to have a home buyer who's going to want to move in and live in that property, then yes, you're probably going to end up going with the decision of having the property vacant before selling it. Again, I just think of like my mom. She recently, my father passed away last year, and the home that my childhood home in Reading, Pennsylvania, is now vacant. They cleaned it all out, and then before selling the property, it was all empty. But that house, if it had a tenant in that property, because it was a residential neighborhood, it really wasn't a rental market. That neighborhood was not. Maybe a few houses in that area were rented, but almost all of them were owner occupied. They lived there to be in that school district. Very few rentals in that area. And so really you're going to let the market conditions dictate. So I would ask your realtor, how many of these properties in this area are rental properties? Is this a rental area or is this more of a owner occupied area? And actually that data is pretty easy to look up too, and you can find that online, a bunch of different sources with the county to find out, how many renters are in this neighborhood. That will really dictate whether or not you should stage it for an owner-occupied sale of that property. That's one piece of this. A couple of the other things that come to mind on this are, yeah, I know how you could feel like being a heel, kicking somebody out, and that absolutely would be the case. So how we've done it in the past is we've given the opportunity to a tenant, are you interested in buying this property? And now the beauty of real estate investing, of course, is you can do it however you want. You had a whole series of questions here, Christopher. You could construct this thing however you want, right? You could take this property and you could do a rent to own situation with a tenant. They're already living in the property. Do they want to own the property? Well, you would simply construct a promissory note. They would put down a deposit. Okay, even though they've been living in the property, maybe the deposit's already on file, maybe just adding an additional amount for down payment and constructing a promissory note there where they pay it off in a certain number of years, right? That's one way to do it. Now, if they don't complete that process, obviously they would lose that deposit. So this is where it can get a little hairy and a little shady, and you want to be protective of those tenants. I don't like there are people out there who will literally take advantage of tenants in this situation. There's been whole exposés about these types of people. Don't be one of those people. And I've never done this, by the way. I've never done a rent-to-own situation. We've offered it to tenants, and they said they were interested in and in the end, we never ended up doing it. But what the way that the sharks operate is that they prey on people like this, where they'll take the deposit knowing that they will never, ever stick it out and actually end up buying the property. And then, of course, they lose that deposit. And then they rinse and repeat with a whole new tenant, with a whole new rent-to-own, scam. Don't be one of those people. But if you construct it in such a way where there are angels out there who construct it in such a way to really help these people become homeowners, and maybe their credit isn't the best, So there are actually some great rent to own people out there out of Baltimore. I interviewed them a number of years ago. Their whole mission is to help them improve their credit and to stay in this home. They work with them. So if that's you, if that's something you want to do, then you could really work with the tenant they own the property, right? You just have to construct a promissory note however you'd want. But again, I would talk to the realtor and find out the market situation here. Is this a situation where someone's going to be interested in buying a property that has a tenant already in place? I can tell you from my own experience, unless it's like a new construction property and a tenant is going to be placed at the time of the closing on buying this property, and here a few weeks later, I bought the property, and now a few weeks later, the property management company is placing a tenant in the property for me as an investor, great. But if I'm like buying it from some tired landlord off of Craigslist, and I don't know the history of this property, I've gotten burned over the years from doing this. And so that's why I'm speaking from experience. Years ago, and I'll never do this again, but we bought a package of 10 properties years ago. And it had tenants in it that were legacy tenants. Some of these tenants were in there for many, many years. And it was my ignorance, and it was really kind of an experiment / ignorance that we did it this way. But the landlord owned like 50 or 60 properties. He was unloading 10 at a time, and he had a great relationship with these tenants in the property. And we thought, great, we will assume these tenants, right? We're going to buy these 10. They'll be all rented. It'll all be hunky-dory. Well, little did we know that he had like sort of a knock on the door rental situation with each of these tenants. Like that's the kind of landlord he was. That's not the kind of landlord I am, right? I'm a hands-off. I want property management to handle this. I don't want to be involved. And so the moment that he was out of the picture, some of the tenants stopped paying. And then we had to go through the eviction process on like 3 or 4 of these units, and it was just a disaster. So very often you're going to, talk to the tenants, ask them what their goals are. Do they want to stay in this property because we're thinking about selling the property? If we do, nothing will change for you. We're going to work with the new owner to place, it'd be the same lease. They will just assume the lease agreement. Nothing will change, in the transfer. You don't have to worry about it. So again, having these discussions, just being upfront, right? We have a rental crisis in this country. We need units, right? There's such a demand for rental properties in the United States. So if there's a problem, God forbid, they need to move out. Maybe the new owners could find new tenants if there's an issue. But again, I would talk to this realtor. They're going to understand what this market looks like. How can you maximize the profits on this property and selling it? And it may need to be vacant and staged properly. Or it may be beneficial that there's a tenant already in the property that's cash flowing, and maybe an investor would be interested in buying the property. It really just comes down to those two things, Christopher. Is it going to be an investor buying the property, or is it going to be a residential owner-occupied property? Someone's going to live in the property. Two different things, right? Because if it's going to be an owner-occupied, they're not going to want a tenant living there. So these things you need to square away to make your decision. Anyway, I know I added a lot more context here, but I just wanted people who may have a different situation to maybe better understand this. So there's a lot more nuances here than just maybe Christopher's question. So thanks for that great question. You can always leave us voicemail questions. Go to our website. We've got a ton of great resources. In fact, we just published a big article over there on West Texas, specifically in our Lubbock market. You can read all about how it's been named one of the most recession-resistant cities in America. How it was pandemic resistant, now it's recession resistant. So that's where we're building our properties. Go and check it out. Just come over to our website at morrisinvest.com and click on the little microphone icon right there. That's how you can leave us a voicemail question that we will read here on the show. Now go out there, take action, and become a real estate investor. I believe it's the #1 way to build wealth. We'll see you next time, everyone.